Hello and welcome to a little video, and today in this video we're going to be talking about my top 4 Doctor Who monsters. Now I'm not including the Daleks or the Cybermen because of course they are the most iconic Doctor Who monsters and it'll be a bit unfair putting them in the list. So I thought I'd get a few of the other monsters that are pretty well known in the Doctor Who universe, and I've sort of come up with a little list and sort of put them all together, and I think these are my personal favourites. Obviously everyone has different favourites of course, so without any further ado, let's go! Okay, so at number 4, in no particular order really, we have the Silurians. Now the Silurians of course first appeared in the John Pertwee story Doctor Who and the Silurians, or a lot of people just like to call it the Silurians, as yes, that's just what it's called, and I think the Sylar is a really great story, and it's part of a magnificent season, of course, which is season 7, and it's John Pertwee's first season, and it's highly regarded as being one of the best Doctor Who seasons of all time, and I personally would agree with that. And I think the Silurians themselves, even though their design is slightly clunky, I do think they are a really good sort of monster. I think the whole backstory is really good, and their the debut story is fantastic. Warriors of the Deep gets a lot of hate, but I think it's not as bad as people say it is, but there are some really bad moments in it. And then of course we saw them in the Matt Smith story, The Hungry Earth and Cold Blood, which is written by the new showrunner Chris Chibnall. Now a lot of the sort of older fans really did not like the new redesign, and I would have to agree that it's probably the worst new series redesign ever. I think it just looks terrible and it doesn't do them justice at all. Maybe we'll get a new redesign at some point, but I prefer the originals. I think they look great. I think the Warriors of the Deep design it's okay, but I don't think it's as good as the original proper Silurians, because they for me they are the Silurians. Like that's the new series ones are just it looks a bit crap really. I like the story, but I think the design itself is it's a bit crap. But yeah, so at number 4 we have the Silurians, so let's move on to number 3. So at number 3 now we have the Autons. Now the Autons I think don't get as much love as they deserve. I think they should be a lot more popular than they currently are at the moment. They're not exactly they don't really spring to mind to a lot of people when they think of really good Doctor Who villains, but for me I really love Spearhead from Space. I think it's a fantastic story. Terror of the Autons is great, and Rose I thought was good. It's just a Russell T Davies toned down version of Spearhead. But I also really love Unit Extinction, which is a story in which the Autons feature, and I think the whole idea of them, which was of course created by the legend that was Robert Holmes, I think he wrote such a great concept of living plastic and the nesting consciousness. I thought it worked really well, and I think it was a good idea for Russell to bring them back into Doctor Who, as I wasn't so keen on what Stephen Moffat did with them, the whole but it was nice to see them back anyhow in a different sort of style. I much like it when they've got like a uniform, if that makes sense. I know they had sort of like a Roman army like type uniform, but I really like it when they're sort of in their overalls. I think that looks really, really cool, and I think it shows in Spearhead from Space how menacing they can be, because you see them shooting people, whereas in Rose for example you hear the gunshot but you don't actually see them being killed, but in Spearhead from Space you've got people doing cartwheels all over the place, and it looks amazing. And of course Terror of the Autons is great. They're not as featured as much, but I think they're still really good in it, and of course that is the first the first appearance of the Master in that story, and I think the Autons they're just amazing. They look great, the whole concept is great, and I just think aesthetically, they look really, really good, and I love all of their stories. I don't think there's a single bad story. I mean, Rose, I'd say, it's not the best story in the world, but it did what it needed to do, which was to reintroduce Doctor Who to a whole new generation, and I think it did a really good job of that. So yeah, I think the Autons are great, and they are one of my favourites, which is why they're in this list. So without any further ado, let's move on to number 2. Number 2 now, we have the Zygons. Now, they've only appeared 3 times in the Doctor Who universe. Once, well, the first appearance was, of course, in the Robert Banks. Not Robert Banks. Was it Robert Banks Stewart? I think the writer of Terror of the Zygons is. Actually, I can check here on the DVD shelf. Yeah, Robert Banks Stewart, as you can see there. I think because I think the producers at the time were like, they sort of looked at the monsters that came before the Zygons and tried to really create something a bit different. And of course, one of the things that the Zygons are well known for is their whispering voices, because previously they've had stories in which there are like villains or monsters that shout a lot. For example, the Daleks, because they always start screaming in that. But the Zygons, they are very different in terms of design and the way they speak and the way they move. They're very different from what we've seen before, and they stick out, and they're iconic because of their orange, the way orange sort of reptile-like skin. And I think Terror of the Zygons is a great story, and I think they were okay in the 50th anniversary. It wasn't like a proper story, it was more of a subplot, and then they came back for the Peter Harness two-parter, which was good, but it was very incredibly heavy-handed, and I think the Zygons, in terms of the redesign, I think it's pretty good. It's not an atrocity like the Silurian design was, but I think they still did a great job of reintroducing the Zygons. The younger fans who may not have not known much about the Zygons beforehand, and I think they did a really good job of that, and I think they were pretty good in that Peter Harness story, despite how heavy-handed it actually was. Yeah, I highly recommend you check out the Zygons and Terror of the Zygons if you haven't, like if you're new to Doctor Who, because some of you may be, but I know there are a lot of you, the people that watch my channel probably have already watched Terror of the Zygons, but I think they have appeared in a few of the Big Finish audios, and I think they work well in audio because of the fact that you've got whispering, they whisper, so you can instantly tell whether or not it's a Zygon speaking. They did kind of appear in a BBV spin-off called, I think it's Zygon When Being You Isn't Enough. I wouldn't really recommend it if you're below the age of 18, because there are some very sexual sort of scenes in there. I shouldn't have probably mentioned it in this video, but I did. It's basically a Doctor Who porno, but if you want to check that out, feel free. You might be scarred for life, but yeah, that's all I'm going to say on that particular subject, because that's an entirely different video for another day. So yeah, the Zygons I think are an absolutely fantastic design. Really love their stories and their appearances and just the whole concept really. Yeah, a great story and a great villain as well. So let's move on to my number 1 choice of my favourite monster. The number 1 choice of favourite monster for me are the Sontarans. Now, I've really grown to love the Sontarans these past couple of years. I did really like them to begin with anyway, but these past couple of years I've really learned to appreciate them a lot more than I did before. It wasn't that I didn't like them before, it's just I preferred some of the other villains, but the Sontarans are probably my favourite Doctor Who monsters or villains, or whatever you want to call them. I think, despite what you think of the stories like the Invasion of Time or the new series story, which I know a lot of people don't really like those stories, but I like all of the stories. I think the ones that they featured in, I think I really love. And I think the Bradford Wall box set is a must for anybody who is getting into classic Doctor Who and wants to check out the classic Sontarans, because I love all of those stories. And I think probably the best one is their first story, which is the Time Warrior, with the Lynx as the only Sontaran that is in there. But he's still fantastic, and the way they've created this soldier-like figure, and it's just amazing. And I think he looks absolutely fantastic. I think all the Sontarans do, but I think the new series redesign, it's all right, but it's not. It's okay. It's just okay. I'm surprised they went for the purple sort of purple and blue color scheme. But I would have liked to see them in sort of silver or black. I think that would have been pretty cool. But apparently the original designs for the new series Sontarans were actually it was pretty much links from the Time Warrior. Like they looked exactly the same, which I would have preferred, and I think a lot of people would as well. But I guess they had to differentiate those new series Sontarans to the classic ones, so people can easily identify them as a rebooted design. But I really like the fact they're a clone army, and then they can breed. I wasn't that impressed with the whole Atmos Systems storyline. I thought that was a bit average, but I think the previous stories, such as the Time Warrior, the Sontaran Experiment, I really enjoy those. And I think General Star or Commander Star, well, I think that's his name in the Sontaran Experiment. I think he looks absolutely fantastic, and if I try and get there we go, you got the particular Sontaran in there, really good design that I really enjoy watching that little two-parter. Yeah, the Sontarans for me are great. I really enjoy every bit of their stories, and if you are like a fan of the Big Finish audios, then I highly recommend checking out the Andrew Smith story, The Lost Stories from the 6th Doctor, the first Sontarans. I think it's a great story, and despite it being on audio, I think it works really well, and I wish we could have seen that on television, but it still works brilliantly on audio. So yeah, thank you very much for watching my top 4 Doctor Who monsters. I hope you enjoyed it. I might do some more top 4 videos or top 5 videos in the future. I've done previous ones before, but you can check those out anytime you want. And yes, so thank you very much for watching this, and I shall see you soon.